You're too sensual, I need you, the rancher whispered to the fiery Apache woman. The sun had barely risen over the rolling hills of Arizona, casting a warm golden light across the dry grass and dusty trails. John Whitaker adjusted the wide brim of his hat and squinted at the horizon. The land stretched endlessly, a mix of open plains, rugged cliffs, and scattered mesquite trees. For years he had worked this land, tending to his cattle, repairing fences, and riding the trails from sunrise to sunset. The work was hard, but John found a strange comfort in the rhythm of it. Out here, far from towns and strangers, a man could measure life by simple things: the health of his herd, the strength of his hands, the reliability of the sky. Yet that morning, a restless feeling stirred in John's chest, something unfamiliar and almost troubling. He had noticed it a week ago when he first glimpsed her, a woman with eyes like dark embers and a presence that demanded attention. Nayeli! He had heard her name whispered among traders and travelers, always accompanied by admiration, sometimes caution. She was said to be clever, brave, and fiery, someone not easily tamed. For John, who had always believed that people could be measured and understood, she was a mystery he could not ignore. The trading post lay in a small clearing at the edge of the reservation. It was a cluster of wooden buildings, weathered and leaning, with signs swinging in the wind. Traders, ranchers, and travelers came here for supplies, news, and gossip. This morning the air smelled of coffee, leather, and wood smoke. Children played near the stables while their mothers called to them in soft voices. Horses neighed in the pen, stamping their hooves against the dirt. John dismounted and walked toward the general store. His boots kicked up little clouds of dust. He kept an eye on the horizon as he approached, half expecting trouble, though he knew there was none. At least, none yet. Inside, the store was crowded with settlers haggling over goods: flour, sugar, rope, nails, and occasionally a few fine trinkets that seemed oddly out of place in such a harsh land. John moved quietly through the room, his eyes scanning for supplies he needed: feed for the horses, a new saddle strap, and perhaps a sturdy knife. Nayeli was sitting on a wooden bench near the back, her long dark hair braided neatly down her back. She wore a simple dress adorned with bright patterns and moccasins that were clearly handmade. Breath scanned the room as if she were measuring everything and everyone, assessing their intentions. Even sitting quietly, there was an energy about her that could not be ignored. It wasn't just beauty, it was strength, confidence, and a sharp intelligence. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and John felt an unusual jolt. It was not desire in the way he had felt before, a shallow longing for a pretty face or soft features. No, this was different. This was curiosity, caution, and respect, all tangled together. Nayeli studied him just as closely, her gaze steady, unreadable. She did not flinch or shy away, though she must have noticed his attention. It was a silent acknowledgement. Two people recognizing the presence of someone extraordinary. A commotion near the stables drew John's attention away. A young boy had gotten too close to a restless horse and was nearly kicked. Nayeli rose without hesitation, moving gracefully across the room. In a few swift steps, she reached the boy and spoke softly, calming both him and the horse. Her hands were sure and confident, her voice steady and commanding. John watched in admiration. She did not need anyone's approval or protection. She offered help because she chose to. He approached her cautiously. "That was quick thinking," he said, his voice low.
"You've got a good way with animals." She glanced at him briefly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "They listen when they know you respect them," she replied.
Her voice was calm but carried authority. "Much like people I've noticed." John's brow furrowed. but she did not offer more than necessary. He could tell she had learned to guard herself carefully, and he respected that. "I'm John Whitaker," he said, holding out a hand. She looked at it for a moment before extending her own, her grip firm. "Psst, Nayeli," she said simply. Her name had a musical quality that lingered in the air. For a while neither spoke, and the sound of trading, talking, and hooves outside filled the space between them. There was a tension, unspoken, but palpable. John realized he had never met anyone like her, someone who could challenge him without raising her voice, someone whose presence demanded attention without demanding submission. As the day wore on, John found himself lingering at the post, pretending to check his supplies but really stealing glances at Nayeli. She was busy with her own tasks, trading beads, talking to other women, carefully counting goods. Her attention to detail, the way she moved through the space with quiet authority, fascinated him. He was used to the simple routines of ranch life, where people could be predictable, their motivations obvious. Nayeli was different. She was unpredictable, alive in ways he could not define. Their interaction that day was brief, but it left an impression. Later, as John mounted his horse to leave, he realized he wanted to know more about her. Not in the shallow sense of attraction, but in the deep, consuming way of curiosity that makes a man willing to step into unfamiliar territory. Breaths. He wanted to understand her world, her people, and the experiences that shaped her fiery spirit. The days that followed, John found reasons to return to the trading post. Sometimes it was supplies, sometimes questions about the land, but mostly it was an excuse to see Nayeli again. He noticed the way she handled conflict, whether with settlers who underestimated her or with other traders who tried to cheat her. She had a resilience born from hardship, a survival instinct honed by years of navigating a world often hostile to her people. One afternoon, a small argument broke out between a settler and Nayeli over a misunderstanding about trade goods. The prospect. The settler accused her unfairly, his tone sharp and insulting. John stepped in, calmly diffusing the situation without confrontation. Nayeli watched him carefully, her eyes appraising. When the man finally left, muttering under his breath, she nodded in acknowledgement. "You have a way with people," she said quietly. John shrugged. "I just don't like seeing unfairness," he replied. "Neither do you, I see." She studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly. Breath. "I have to protect myself. It's the only way I survive." Bah. He nodded, understanding more in her words than the casual tone suggested. She lived a life that required constant vigilance, navigating threats from people who did not understand or respect her. And yet, there was no bitterness in her demeanor, only strength. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, John rode back to his ranch. The encounter had left him thoughtful, his mind filled with questions and a growing admiration for Nayeli. He realized that the land he thought he knew so well, the routines he thought he understood, felt different now. He had glimpsed a life shaped by courage, wisdom, and resilience. The life of a woman who could command respect without asking for it. That night, as the wind whispered through the mesquite trees and the stars blinked into existence above the open plains, John could not shake the memory of her gaze. Nayeli was a puzzle he did not yet know how to solve, a story he wanted to read page by page. But more than curiosity, there was a quiet, persistent pull in his chest, a recognition that his world, once predictable and simple, was about to change in ways he could not yet imagine. And somewhere in the distance the faint glow of the reservation lights flickered, a reminder that two worlds were meeting. one rancher and one fiery Apache woman, each strong, each wary, and both about to discover a connection that would challenge everything they knew. The days after their first encounter at the trading post passed slowly, yet every moment seemed to pull John Whitaker and Nayeli closer together. John returned to the post under various pretexts, sometimes for supplies, sometimes to ask questions about the land, and sometimes simply to catch a glimpse of her. Nayeli, ever cautious, kept her distance, yet she allowed brief conversations, curious about the man who had entered her world without arrogance, a man who seemed willing to listen rather than judge. One afternoon, as the sun hung high and hot in the sky, John found Nayeli sitting by a small stream that ran near the edge of the reservation. She was cleaning water jars, her hands steady and precise, and the sunlight glinted off the beads woven into her hair. He approached quietly, unsure whether his presence would be welcomed.
"You come here often," Nayeli said without looking up.
Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of amusement in it, as though she knew the truth before he spoke it. John smiled, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I guess I do. The water's clean, and the shade is good." Breaths, and it's peaceful. Vibration. She finally glanced at him, her dark eyes assessing, searching for any hidden motive. Peace is rare these days. Even in the quietest places, danger can appear. "You should be careful." John nodded. "I've been careful my whole life, but sometimes I wonder if living cautiously is really living at all." Breakdown. Nayeli paused, considering his words. There was something about him, a mixture of honesty and thoughtfulness that made her want to speak openly, even though she had learned to trust few. "You think too much," she said finally, a small smile touching her lips. "The world is not always kind, and people—" "They are not always honest. You must learn when to listen and when to act." "You cannot do both all the time." John laughed softly, a deep, warm sound. "Maybe I'm ready to learn from someone like you." The smile on her face widened, but there was still a caution in her gaze. "Maybe," she said, leaving the word hanging in the air. As the weeks passed, John and Nayeli continued to cross paths. Sometimes it was by chance. Other times, John deliberately rode his horse along the trails that led near her people's village. Each meeting revealed more about Nayeli's world. Her knowledge of the land, her skill with horses, her quick mind, and the traditions she upheld. John was fascinated by everything she taught him, from identifying edible plants to understanding the subtle signs of weather changes in the desert. Despite growing trust, challenges began to emerge. Settlers in the area whispered about John's friendship with Nayeli, questioning his loyalty and judgment. Rumors spread painting Nayeli as dangerous or unpredictable, and John felt the pressure of these whispers in every interaction outside his ranch. On the other side, Nayeli faced skepticism from her own people. Tribal elders warned her to be careful with John, reminding her of the dangers of trusting a man from a culture that had often oppressed and displaced her people. One late afternoon, as a soft breeze stirred the tall grasses, John and Nayeli found themselves alone near a small canyon. They had been following a wild horse that had escaped from a neighboring ranch, its hooves thundering against the rocks. Nayeli moved with the grace of someone born to the land, her eyes focused, her hands ready to act at a moment's notice. John tried to keep up, but he knew he could never match her skill. Finally, Nayeli spoke, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "The horse is afraid. You must approach slowly, or you will scare it." John nodded, taking careful steps as she instructed. He felt a strange mix of admiration and humility. Here was a woman who had lived in this land all her life, who understood it in ways he never could. And yet she was willing to let him learn, to guide him through something he had no experience with. By the time the sun began to set, the horse was calm, its ears flicking as Nayeli coaxed it toward the fence. John helped secure it, and together they watched it settle into the small corral. The quiet moment after the excitement felt intimate, a shared understanding forming between them. "You are patient," Nayeli said, her eyes meeting his. Most men would have scared it away by now.
John smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest.
"I'm learning from the best." But even as their connection deepened, danger loomed nearby. A group of bandits had been raiding nearby settlements, stealing cattle and supplies. Rumors of their violence reached John, and he knew he had to protect his ranch. Nayeli, aware of the threats to her people as well, warned him about the importance of being prepared. One evening as they walked along the ridge overlooking the plains, she spoke cautiously.
They come for what they want.
Sometimes it is not just cattle. Sometimes it is people. You must be careful, John. He looked at her, understanding the gravity in her words.
I will.
But I cannot let fear rule me. I have to face it, whatever comes. She studied him, her expression thoughtful. Courage is not always enough. Respect for the land, for people. That is what keeps you alive. Their walks along the ridge became a daily ritual, a time to share knowledge, observe the land, and speak freely. John learned about the traditions of Nayeli's people, the stories passed down through generations, the way they read the stars, the rituals that honored the land and their ancestors. Began to understand John's life, the struggles of a rancher in a harsh and unforgiving environment, the long hours of work, and the moments of solitude he cherished. Despite their growing bond, they could not ignore the tension surrounding them. One afternoon, a neighboring rancher confronted John, angered by his association with Nayeli.
"You shouldn't be spending time with her," the man said sharply.
"It's dangerous, and people will talk."
John's jaw tightened. "I choose who I spend time with," he replied calmly but firmly.
"And I choose her." The rancher scoffed and rode off, muttering under his breath. John watched him go, his mind heavy with the knowledge that prejudice and suspicion were always close. Nayeli, who had observed the encounter from a distance, approached him quietly. "You are brave," she said, her voice soft. "But you do not know how much danger comes from people who think they are right."
I am ready, John said. I cannot let fear stop me from living or from knowing someone like you.
Nayeli considered his words, a mixture of admiration and concern in her eyes. She had seen many men boast of courage, but fail when faced with true adversity. John's resolve, however, seemed genuine. He did not seek to control her, nor did he dismiss her knowledge. He was willing to learn, to understand, and to respect. As the weeks turned into months, John and Nayeli's bond continued to grow. They faced challenges together, the harshness of the desert sun, sudden storms, and the constant awareness of bandits and hostile neighbors. Through it all, their trust deepened, forming a connection that went beyond friendship. Yet, with every shared moment, both were aware of the obstacles ahead. Nayeli's loyalty to her people and John's responsibilities as a rancher meant that their relationship could never be simple.
There were societal expectations, cultural boundaries, and the ever-present danger of violence.
But in each other's presence, they found a rare sense of freedom. A space where they could be honest, strong, and vulnerable, all at once. One evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and purple and the first stars began to appear, John and Nayeli sat near the stream where they had first spoken weeks ago. The air was calm, and the desert seemed to hold its breath. "I have never met anyone like you," John said quietly. "You are different." Not just because of where you come from, but because of who you are. Strong, clever, fearless. Psst. Nayeli looked at him, a flicker of emotion crossing her face. And you are stubborn but not foolish. You listen, even when it would be easier to ignore. That is rare. Breath. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars reflect in the water. The desert, with all its dangers and beauty, seemed to embrace them in that moment, offering a sense of peace amidst uncertainty. John realized that their connection was growing into something neither could ignore. It was more than curiosity or respect. It was a deep, unspoken bond, formed through shared experiences, challenges, and understanding. Nayeli, too, felt the pull, though she struggled with the knowledge that their worlds were not easily joined. As night fell, they reluctantly parted, each returning to their separate lives, yet carrying the presence of the other in their thoughts. The desert was vast, and life was difficult, but both knew that their paths had crossed for a reason. And in the quiet of the night, beneath a sky full of stars, a fragile, powerful connection began to take root. A connection that would be tested by danger, culture, and the harsh realities of life in the Arizona plains. The days grew hotter as summer deepened over the Arizona plains, the sun beating down relentlessly on the dry, dusty land. John Whitaker had been rising before dawn, tending to his herd, repairing fences, and checking traps along the edges of his property. But yet, even in the midst of his routine, his thoughts often wandered to Nayeli. She had become more than a curiosity. She had become a presence in his life that he could not ignore. Her fiery spirit, intelligence, and courage had captured his respect, and now something deeper was taking hold. An admiration, a longing, a sense of connection he had never experienced before.
Nayeli, too, found herself thinking of John.
She had grown cautious around him at first, as any woman in her position must. But his honesty, his respect for her knowledge, and his willingness to see beyond her heritage had slowly broken down her defenses. Desperate, she felt a warmth in his presence, a comfort that was rare in her life. Yet she could not forget the risks. Thrusting a man from the settler world came with dangers, not just to herself, but to her family and her people. Every time she allowed herself to relax, a voice of caution reminded her that the world was not forgiving, that love, if it grew too fast, could bring trouble. One late afternoon, as the golden sun began to tilt toward the horizon, John rode toward the reservation, hoping to find Nayeli near the river where they had met weeks before. He found her tending to a small herd of horses, moving among them with a grace and skill that left him in awe. She noticed him immediately, her eyes narrowing slightly, not in suspicion, but in awareness. "John," she said, her voice steady yet carrying a note of surprise. "You are persistent."
"I am,
he replied, dismounting with ease. "Then I wanted to see if you would teach me more about handling the horses. I'm learning, but I still have much to understand." Nayeli studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Very well.
There is more to this work than strength. You must observe, understand, and anticipate."
Great. Horses do not respond to force alone. For hours they work together. John tried to match her pace, copying her movements, listening to her instructions. He stumbled at times, frustrated by his own clumsiness, but Nayeli never scolded him. She guided him with patience, correcting his mistakes, encouraging him when he succeeded. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The heat of the day gave way to a soft evening breeze, carrying the scents of the desert flowers and the cool water of the river.
As they finished securing the last horse, John finally spoke, his voice quiet but intense.
"Nayeli, there is something I need to say."
I cannot ignore it any longer. You are different from anyone I have ever met. You are strong, fearless, clever, and I feel drawn to you more than I thought possible. Nayeli's hands paused, and she looked at him carefully. Her dark eyes softened, but there was a caution still present. John, you must understand. There are dangers in what you feel.
Our worlds are different. People may not accept what grows between us.
I know, he said, stepping closer. I do not care what people think. Bye.
I care about you, and I want...
I need you in my life, Nayeli. But she had felt the pull as well. But admitting it aloud was a risk. Yet standing there in the quiet desert, with the horses resting nearby and the sun setting behind them, she allowed herself to speak the truth. I feel it too, John. But we must be careful.
We cannot let our feelings endanger anyone. John reached out and gently took her hand.
It was a simple gesture, yet it carried more meaning than words could express. The connection between them, built over weeks of shared work, trust, and understanding, became tangible. Yet life in the plains was never simple. That very night, as John rode back to his ranch under the silver glow of the moon, he noticed movement near the edge of his property. Narration. Shadows shifted in the darkness, and a sense of unease settled over him. Bandits had been raiding the area for weeks, and he knew that their danger was never far. He spurred his horse forward, prepared to defend his land, his cattle, and now, the fragile sense of peace he had found with Nayeli. The next morning, John rode to Nayeli's village to warn her of the possible threat. He found her gathering water from the river, her movements calm and purposeful, though her eyes flickered with concern as she saw him approach. "There have been reports of bandits near your village," he said, his voice low. "But they might come closer. We need to be ready." Nayeli nodded, already thinking ahead. "We will prepare. But we must act carefully. We cannot let fear control us. The land is our ally if we respect it." Together they worked through the day, reinforcing fences, securing the horses, and planning ways to protect the villagers and John's cattle. Their collaboration was seamless, built on mutual trust and understanding. Yet, as they worked side by side, the tension between them grew. Each glance, each touch, each moment of shared struggle reminded them of the connection that had blossomed despite the challenges around them. One evening, after the sun had dipped below the horizon and the desert was bathed in the soft light of dusk, they sat near a small fire. The air was cool, and the distant sounds of animals settling for the night created a peaceful background. "Nayeli," John said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "I cannot pretend any longer. I want to be with you." Breath. "I want to face whatever comes. Together." Her gaze met his, steady and unwavering. She took a deep breath, weighing her feelings against the risks. "I want that too, John," she admitted. "But we must be careful. Our choices affect more than just us. Our responsibilities, dangers, and people who may not understand."
I understand, he replied, his voice firm.
"But I cannot deny what I feel, and I believe we can find a way if we trust each other." For a long moment they simply sat, watching the firelight dance across their faces. The desert stretched endlessly around them, a vast and beautiful world filled with both danger and promise. In that quiet, fragile moment, they allowed themselves to acknowledge the bond that had grown stronger with each shared day. Each challenge overcome, each moment of mutual respect and understanding. But the world outside their small circle of trust was not idle. Rumors of their growing closeness began to spread, reaching ears that were not friendly. Settlers whispered about the unusual friendship between a rancher and an Apache woman, and some warned John to reconsider his choices. Within Naeli's community, elders reminded her of the risks of becoming too involved with someone from the settler world. Their bond, though genuine and strong, had become a subject of scrutiny, a point of tension that neither could fully escape. Despite this, John and Naeli chose to face their feelings openly, knowing the challenges ahead would test their courage, loyalty, and wisdom. They continued to ride together, work together, and share quiet moments of conversation, each learning more about the other and about themselves. In these shared experiences, their respect deepened, and the warmth between them grew undeniable. One afternoon, as they rode along a narrow canyon trail, John noticed signs of the bandits: broken branches, disturbed soil, and distant hoofbeats. He signaled to Naeli, and they slowed, moving cautiously. The knowledge of potential danger sharpened their senses and forced them to rely on each other completely. Naeli guided him through hidden paths, teaching him how to observe the land for signs of movement and how to anticipate the actions of those who would do harm. Passed with tense vigilance, but eventually the danger passed. They returned to the river, both aware that the threat had reminded them how fragile safety could be. Yet the experience had also strengthened their bond, proving that together they could face adversity and survive. As evening fell once more, they shared a quiet moment near the water's edge. John looked at Naeli, his eyes filled with a mix of admiration, concern, and longing.
"We have faced much together," he said.
"And I know there is more to come. But I am not afraid, Naeli."
Not when I have you by my side. Her eyes softened, and for the first time she allowed herself a small, genuine smile.
"And I am not afraid either," she replied. "With caution, respect, and trust, we can face what comes."
But remember, John, courage alone is never enough. We must be wise too.
In the quiet of that desert night, under a sky filled with stars, John and Naeli found a fragile peace, a moment of understanding that, despite the dangers, they could face the world.
Their bond had grown beyond friendship into something stronger, something unspoken yet powerful.
It was a connection that promised hope, courage, and the possibility of love, even in a world filled with uncertainty.
As they parted that night, each returned to their own life, yet the memory of shared moments lingered, a thread connecting them across the plains.
They both knew that challenges lay ahead, prejudice, danger, and cultural divides. But they also knew that what they felt for each other was worth the risks, and in the vast, unforgiving land of Arizona, two hearts had found each other, ready to face the future together.
The Arizona plains were quieter now than they had been all summer. The scorching heat had given way to a mild autumn, the golden grasses swaying gently in the breeze.
John Whitaker rode slowly along the ridge near his ranch, his eyes scanning the horizon. The cattle were calm, and the fences he had repaired weeks before held strong. But yet, even amid this small sense of order, his thoughts were with Naeli. Their relationship had grown steadily over the months, strengthened by shared work, mutual respect, and the quiet moments of understanding that had become their foundation. Despite the warnings and whispers from both sides, the settlers and Naeli's people, neither had allowed fear to drive them apart. They had learned to navigate a world filled with suspicion, prejudice, and danger, and in the process had come to trust each other completely. That morning, John made his way to Naeli's village, a small settlement nestled near the river and surrounded by gentle hills. She was waiting for him at the edge of the village, her hands tending to a young horse foal that had wandered too close to the riverbank. The sunlight highlighted the patterns on her dress, the intricate beadwork woven carefully into her hair, and the determination in her eyes.
John, she said, glancing up, I was hoping you would come today.
Rasp.
There are things we should prepare for before winter sets in.
He smiled, dismounting. I've brought supplies and tools.
We'll make sure your village and my ranch are ready. We can face the cold together if we plan carefully.
Best. For hours they worked side by side. They mended fences, reinforced shelters, and checked the food stores. Nayeli taught John how to prepare root vegetables and dried meats in ways that would last through the winter, while John shared methods for repairing tools and securing the cattle pens. Their conversations flowed easily, filled with laughter, questions, and quiet reflections. Each moment revealed more about their lives, their values, and the world they both cherished. As the sun began to lower in the sky, painting the plains with a warm amber glow, Nayeli paused and looked at John.
You have changed, she said softly, almost as if to herself. Since we met, you have become more patient, more thoughtful.
The land has taught you many lessons, but you have also learned from me. That is rare. John shook his head, smiling. I have learned because I wanted to.
Not just from you, but from seeing the world as it truly is, tough, beautiful, and full of surprises. You have taught me more than I could have imagined.
Their shared smile held a depth that neither needed to explain. It was the kind of understanding built over months of trust, of facing danger together, of seeing each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. In the quiet of the evening, with the plains stretching endlessly before them, they felt a sense of belonging, together, yet still deeply connected to the land that had shaped them both.
But life was never entirely free of challenges.
In the weeks that followed, tension arose once more when a neighboring rancher approached John with an uneasy look on his face.
There's talk that some settlers are planning to expand their land closer to the reservation, the man said.
It could bring trouble, not just for your cattle, but for everyone nearby. John nodded, his mind already turning to solutions. We will be ready. Nayeli and I have been preparing. We cannot control everything, but we can protect what is ours and what matters to us. He rode to Nayeli's village immediately to share the news. She listened carefully, her face calm but alert.
We must stay vigilant, she said. We cannot let fear guide our decisions, but we must anticipate the challenges.
The land gives us signs if we pay attention. Together, they strengthened their defenses, working with the villagers and ranch hands. Fences were reinforced, lookout points established, and contingency plans discussed. They worked tirelessly, aware that the safety of their community depended on preparation, wisdom, and cooperation. Through it all, their bond grew stronger. They shared stories of their pasts, of childhood memories and lessons learned from elders. John told Nayeli of his life on the plains, the hardships of ranching, and the dreams he had once thought impossible. Nayeli shared her experiences, the teachings of her people, and the deep connection she felt to the land and her ancestors. These exchanges created a tapestry of understanding, weaving their lives together despite cultural and societal divides. One evening, as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, John and Nayeli sat quietly near a small fire. The air was cool, and the desert sounds, the chirping of crickets, the distant call of owls, the rustle of the wind through the grasses, created a peaceful backdrop.
I've been thinking,
John said, breaking the comfortable silence. About the future. About us. We have faced so much together, but I want to know if we can continue. Can we find a way to live openly, to protect what we've built without fear?
Nayeli's eyes softened, reflecting the firelight.
Desp. I have thought about it too, she admitted, but it will not be easy. People will question us, dangers will come, and we will need to remain cautious. But I believe, if we are patient and wise, we can create a life together that honors both our worlds.
John reached out, taking her hand in his.
Then we will face it together, he said firmly. I will not let anything separate us if I can help it. Her fingers tightened around his, a silent acknowledgement of her commitment. In that moment, the desert seemed to embrace them, the vast landscape offering a quiet blessing to their union. They had faced threats, prejudice, and uncertainty, yet their connection had endured, rooted in respect, courage, and genuine affection. As winter approached, John and Nayeli continued their work, preparing the land and the village for the colder months.
Though it was rare on the plains, but the nights grew cold and frost appeared in the early mornings.
They reinforced shelters, stored food, and taught younger villagers and ranch hands how to survive and thrive during harsh conditions. Each day was filled with purpose, but also moments of quiet reflection and shared laughter, further strengthening the bond between them. One day, a minor conflict arose with a neighboring rancher who questioned John's association with Nayeli. But instead of confrontation, John handled the situation with calm authority, demonstrating fairness and respect. Nayeli watched with pride as he navigated the tension, realizing that courage, wisdom, and integrity could overcome prejudice more effectively than force. Their ability to face challenges together became an example for others. The villagers, once wary, began to see John as an ally and friend, while some settlers gradually respected Nayeli's intelligence and skill. Slowly, the community adapted, learning that cooperation and understanding were more valuable than suspicion and division. Amid these successes, John and Nayeli found moments of quiet joy. They rode together across the plains, observing wildlife, sharing stories, and simply enjoying the beauty of the land. They celebrated small victories, the birth of a foal, a repaired fence, a successful harvest, and comforted each other in times of difficulty. Their partnership, forged through shared work and mutual respect, had become unshakable. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, John spoke softly to Nayeli. We have built something remarkable together. Not just trust and understanding, but a life that bridges our worlds.
I am proud of what we've accomplished. Nayeli smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading light.
And I am proud too. We have faced dangers, prejudice, and uncertainty, yet we have not faltered.
We have learned from each other and grown stronger. That is something rare, John.
As winter arrived in full, the desert landscape transformed. Frost covered the grasses in the early mornings, and the nights were long and cold. Yet the preparations John and Nayeli had made ensured that the ranch, the village, and the people they cared for were safe.
Inside their shared spaces, warmth and comfort abounded, created not only by fires and blankets, but by the bond they had nurtured over many months.
In the quiet evenings, sitting together by the fire, they often reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From their first meeting at the trading post to the challenges they had faced together, their story was one of courage, patience, and respect. They had learned that love was not just about passion. It was about understanding, protecting, and standing together through adversity. By spring, their union had become a symbol of hope in the community. Their story spread quietly, told in respectful whispers rather than rumors.
It inspired others to look beyond prejudice, to value cooperation, and to recognize the strength found in mutual respect.
John and Nayeli's connection had become a living example of how two people from different worlds could create a life together built on trust, courage, and shared purpose. As the seasons turned, they continued to work, to teach, and to protect the land and people they cared for. Their children, born years later, carried the legacy of both worlds, the resilience and knowledge of Nayeli's people, and the practical wisdom and perseverance of John's ranching life. Through them, the lessons of courage, respect, and love were passed down, ensuring that the story of John and Nayeli would endure. And so in the vast open plains of Arizona, the rancher and the fiery Apache woman had not only found each other, but they had built a life that honored their heritage, embraced the land, and stood as a testament to the power of trust, courage, and love across boundaries. The challenges had been great, but together they had overcome them, leaving a legacy of hope, resilience, and unity for generations to come.